My name is Clara Whitmore, and I will never forget the way smoke smells when it's mixed with betrayal. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. It was a Sunday night in late October, the kind where the wind outside hums like it knows secrets it's not allowed to share. The house was quiet. I had just turned in early, curled up in bed with a novel I barely managed to keep open past the first chapter. My husband Eric said he was going down to the guest house, said he wanted to sort through some storage, clean things up, maybe prep for a small renovation. Something about maybe converting it into a rentable space. I only nodded. That wasn't unusual. Eric liked to start projects. I must have dozed off around 10. The next thing I remember was the sound of the smoke alarm, except it was faint, muffled. Not like a piercing wail, more like a sick bird trying to scream through walls. I blinked through the haze. My throat was dry. The air tasted thick wrong. And then I saw it. Smoke curling like ghost fingers under the door. I bolted upright, coughing. The alarm finally kicked into its full scream just as I reached for my phone, but there was no signal. The lights flickered, then died. I called for Eric. Once. Twice. No answer. I stumbled out of bed, barefoot, heart pounding. The hallway was thick with smoke. I squinted through it, moving toward the stairs, but halfway there, I saw orange glow crawling up the walls like a monster from beneath the floorboards. I was trapped. The guest house. Something had gone wrong. Windows. I needed to get out through the window. I ran back to the bedroom, grabbed a blanket, and smashed open the side window with a lamp. Shards of glass rained down the porch roof as I crawled through the frame, barefoot, smoke searing my lungs. I wrapped the blanket around my hand, lowered myself out as far as I could, then jumped into the damp grass below. I didn't feel the impact. I just ran. Fire trucks arrived minutes later. Neighbors poured out in robes and slippers. Someone wrapped a jacket around me. My ears rang and my chest burned. But through it all, I scanned the crowd looking for Eric. Then I saw him. On the far end of the lawn near the guest house, still intact, barely touched by the flames. He was holding someone. Not me. A woman. Wrapped in a coat, hair soot-streaked, eyes wide. And he was gripping her hand like he thought he might lose her. He didn't even look my way. I stayed silent. Let them take me to the ambulance where I sat on the edge, oxygen mask pressed to my face, eyes trained on them. Who was she? Why was she there? And why had he saved her first? He didn't even ask the firefighters where I was. Didn't shout my name. Didn't run toward the main house screaming, my wife's still inside. He didn't do any of that. Because in that moment, he wasn't worried about me. He was worried about her. When the paramedics finally cleared me, I refused to go to the hospital. I wanted to see what the fire had taken. Inside the house, the damage was brutal. The fire had started in the kitchen, or at least that's where it had burned hottest, charring walls, curling ceiling tiles like dried petals. But it hadn't spread far. It was almost as if it had been contained, controlled. The fire captain said something about a wiring fault, a freak surge. But I didn't hear the rest, because something wasn't right. And somewhere deep inside I already knew this wasn't an accident. And Eric wasn't a hero. When he finally approached me, it wasn't with guilt. It wasn't with relief. It was with calculation. "She's okay," he said. "Thank God. She just stopped by to drop something off. She was in the guest house when she saw the fire and came to get me. I had to get her out." "Who is she?" I asked, voice hoarse from smoke. "Coworker," he said. "Emily. She's new at the firm." That lie was too smooth. Too easy. I nodded like I believed him. But I didn't. Because he never asked if I was okay. That night, as I curled up in the untouched part of the guest house, I couldn't sleep. I replayed it all over and over again, the smoke, the silence, the way I had to jump to survive. And I remembered, when I had called his name from the hallway, I had heard something. A door closing. Not the guest house. The basement door. And a woman's voice hushed urgent. They weren't just caught in a fire together. They had been hiding together. And when flames started spreading, he had made a choice. He left me to burn. To save her. And from that moment on, I made mine. He would never see me coming. By morning, the house reeked of smoke and melted insulation, the walls stained with ash and memories I couldn't trust anymore. The firefighters had done their job. The structure had been saved. But something far more important had collapsed overnight. My belief in Eric. He made us breakfast like nothing had happened, just scrambled eggs and toast in the guest house kitchenette, a tight smile on his face, a slight tremble in his hands. I sat across from him, watching the cracks form behind his mask. "She's okay," he repeated. "Emily. Thank God she got out." I nodded. "You helped her escape." He looked down at his plate. "I didn't know where you were, Clara. The house was filling up so fast. I thought maybe you'd already gotten out." That lie delivered so gently might have worked if I hadn't seen the truth in the flames, if I hadn't witnessed him not looking for me. But I said nothing. Just chewed my toast and swallowed smoke. Later that afternoon, the insurance investigator arrived. She was a brisk woman named Janice with steel gray hair and eyes that didn't miss a thing. She walked through the house in boots that crunched over the charred wood, murmuring technical jargon to herself. She took photos, made notes, asked questions. Then she stopped in front of the guest house door. She looked at the doorknob, then back at Eric. This place was locked from the inside. Eric hesitated. "I think so." She came running out when she saw the fire. I guess she locked it behind her by habit. Janice's eyes narrowed just for a moment. "Strange," she said. "Because the latch looks tampered with." My gaze snapped to hers, but I said nothing. When she left, Eric went back to pretending we were still a team. He talked about cleaning up, hiring contractors, fixing what could be saved. "We can make it better than before," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. I smiled, but inside I was watching, recording. Every movement, every word. I started journaling that night. I documented everything, times, dates, who said what. I created a folder on my computer, password protected. I labeled it Recovery Plan, but it wasn't for the house. It was for me. 3 days after the fire, Emily returned. I was sitting on the porch of the guest house staring at the scorched roofline of what used to be our bedroom when I saw her car pull into the driveway, a sleek metallic blue sedan with dealer plates. She stepped out in low heels and a cashmere wrap, her face pale but lips painted. She didn't look like a woman recovering from trauma. She looked like someone coming to collect something. I stayed seated. Let Eric greet her first. Watched from the porch as he walked quickly down the steps, his voice low, his hand grazing her back. She leaned into him subtly, but enough for me to catch. He glanced my way. I raised my teacup. Later that evening, I asked him, "Was she worth it?" He paused mid-step in the kitchen. "What you left me in a burning house, Eric. For her? Was she worth it?" His face shifted. First confusion, then guilt, then defense. "It wasn't like that. You don't know what was happening. I was saving your mistress," I finished for him. He didn't deny it. Just ran his hands through his hair and muttered, "You're overreacting." Overreacting. To almost dying. To being discarded like a bag of clothes in a flood. I smiled. "You're right. I must be imagining things." And I let him believe that. That night, while he slept on the pull-out couch in the guest house, I went to the main house. Slipped through the fire-blackened hallway. The damage had mostly spared the office, a miracle really. Or maybe something more calculated. Inside his desk drawer, tucked beneath a pile of outdated insurance bills, I found it. A printed lease for the guest house, signed by Eric and Emily. Backdated to 2 weeks before the fire. The rent $1. And the reason short-term transitional housing during professional relocation. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I did. He'd been moving her in, not helping her, not being generous. He had been replacing me piece by piece, and the fire might have been the final transition. But he made one mistake. He left me breathing. And now I was going to burn his world down one lie at a time. The woman in the ambulance. That image stayed with me long after the fire trucks pulled away, and the last ash had settled like snowfall on the grass. She had been sitting on the back step of the ambulance wrapped in a wool blanket someone had handed her, but it wasn't the blanket I remembered. It was the way her hand gripped Eric's like it was a lifeline, like he was the one who had been caught in the fire. He crouched beside her head, bowed, nodding along to whatever she whispered like the rest of the world had disappeared. Including me. Even with oxygen tubes in her nose, the woman looked composed. Not frantic. Not shaken like I was. I'd just jumped from a window to survive. She apparently had been rescued, and he didn't even check on me first. When I replay that scene, I try to make excuses. Maybe he didn't see me. Maybe he thought I'd already escaped. Maybe his adrenaline was clouding his priorities. But deep down I know. He made a choice. And it wasn't me. The day after the fire, a woman from the fire department came by to walk me through the investigation notes. Her name was Officer Reyes. Professional. Efficient. She asked questions about what I was doing that evening, if I'd noticed any strange smells or lights flickering before the fire began. No, I said quietly. Just that I woke up to smoke. And your husband? Did he notice anything off in the guest house? I glanced at Eric, who was across the room pretending to repair a bookshelf that had barely been singed. I don't know, I said. He didn't mention anything. She jotted something down, nodded, and left. I wanted to scream. He knows exactly what happened. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. Later that afternoon, I went out for a walk to clear my head. My legs moved automatically, carrying me past familiar houses that now looked alien. As I turned a corner, I saw a woman stepping out of the nearby coffee shop, the same woman from the ambulance. Emily. She didn't see me. But I saw her whole upright, smiling faintly as she scrolled her phone. She looked like someone who hadn't just survived a fire. She looked like someone who had won. I followed her for a block, staying several paces behind. She walked like she belonged here, confident, like she had nothing to hide. I ducked behind a parked van and watched her unlock a car, a rental. Inside on the passenger seat, I saw a folder. She slid in, closed the door, and drove off. I memorized the plate, the make, the color. It felt like watching a ghost drift into daylight. When I got back home, Eric was sitting on the porch sipping coffee like it was any other Tuesday. "Where were you?" he asked, not looking up. "Getting air." He nodded. "You okay?" I stared at him. "You seem calm." He shrugged. "I'm trying to keep things steady for both of us." It was always for both of us with Eric. Every lie wrapped in partnership. That night, I dug into the lease I'd found. I scanned it into my computer, made digital backups, highlighted the line that said commencement date October 3rd, 2 weeks before the fire. If this was his idea of a side project, then he'd laid the foundation long before the smoke touched our walls. The next day, Emily came again. This time, I didn't hide. I stood on the porch as she pulled up. She hesitated in her car before stepping out like she wasn't sure if she should face me. "Good. Emily right," I said, voice calm. She blinked. "Yes. I'm my husband's coworker." Her eyes widened just slightly. "I wanted to thank you," I continued, "for helping Eric during the fire. He said you were the one who noticed it." She nodded slowly. "Yes, I saw the smoke through the window. From inside the guest house." A pause. "Yes. I tilted my head. Must have been terrifying. It was. Odd, I said, because the guest house has no line of sight to the main kitchen where the fire started. You'd have had to walk to the back fence to see that smoke. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. I smiled. Anyway, I'm glad you're all right. And I turned and walked inside, leaving the silence thick behind me. That night, Eric was furious. You interrogated her? I made polite conversation. You know she's dealing with trauma, too. Of course she is, I said. It's hard recovering from near death. You should ask her how she manages it so gracefully. He stormed off. I went back to my notes. The next morning, I opened the local news site. There was a short piece, small kitchen fire displaces couple. No names, no pictures, just a blur of facts. Harmless, but the comment section wasn't. Someone anonymous had written weird how she was in the guest house at that hour. Sounds like she lives there? Another reply. Guess the wife's lucky she got out. Another too bad the fire didn't clear out the lies, too. People always see more than they say. I started noticing other details. Receipts in Eric's jacket pocket from a boutique 3 towns over. One in her size. A hair tie on the bathroom sink that wasn't mine. The scent of her perfume still lingering in the guest house air. He wasn't being careful anymore. Because he thought I was broken. Thought the fire had singed away my ability to fight. But what he didn't realize was, it had forged something new in me. A version of Clara that didn't ask for permission or forgiveness. That evening, I found him in the backyard trimming dead branches. What are you doing? I asked. Cleaning up. Getting ready for the adjusters next week. Funny, I said. You're finally doing yard work now that half the house is gone. He chuckled awkwardly. Trying to make things right. Are you? I said. He paused. Clara, I know things haven't been perfect, but I want to fix this. I stared at him. Not because I believed him, but because I wanted to memorize the look on his face, the one he wore before everything he'd built came crashing down. Later that night, I opened a blank document on my laptop, and at the top, I typed, Fireline, a survivor's statement. Then I began writing everything. Every moment. Every betrayal. Every receipt. Because soon I'd need more than emotion to win. I'd need evidence, and this time I wouldn't be the one running from flames. I didn't sleep much after that. It wasn't the nightmares or the insomnia, it was the clarity. I finally saw my husband not as the man I had built a life with, not as the person I had loved since we were both in our 20s, but as a strategist. A man who had been planning an exit long before the fire ever touched our walls. And now, I had a strategy of my own. 2 days later, the insurance company scheduled an inspection with a forensic fire investigator. Eric asked if I wanted to be there when he arrived. I said yes, not because I wanted to help, but because I wanted to watch. Closely. The inspector's name was Brian Feller. He was a tall, sharp-eyed man with a worn leather notebook and steel-toed boots. The moment he stepped inside, his posture changed. He sniffed the air like a hunting dog and said, "Something's off here." Eric stiffened. The fire started in the kitchen. Brian knelt near the charred floorboards. "That's what your fire report says. But there's something strange about the burn pattern." I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" He tapped a darkened patch of floor. "This kind of burn, it's too clean. Almost like an accelerant was used. But the main house doesn't show evidence of one, yet the guest house shows trace signs of melted insulation near the entry door." Eric laughed nervously. "You think there were 2 fires?" Brian stood slowly. "I think one fire started a little too conveniently, and someone might have been trying to contain it, not stop it." That sentence stuck with me. Trying to contain it. Not stop it. Like someone had started the fire and hoped it would spread only so far. That evening, Eric went quiet. He barely spoke during dinner. No jokes. No forced affection, just silence. He stared at his phone a lot, typed quick messages, frowned. He thought I didn't notice, but I did. I noticed everything now. 3 nights later, I waited until he fell asleep in the guest house. Then I opened his phone. The passcode hadn't changed because Eric was arrogant. He believed in appearances over security. I went straight to his hidden photo album. There, I found what I was looking for. Selfies of him and Emily, in our bedroom, on our couch, by the fireplace. In one of them, she wore my robe. I felt sick. Not with grief, I had moved past grief. This was something different, something colder. Then I found the emails, forwarded documents between him and a real estate lawyer, drafts of a property reassignment. The guest house wasn't the only asset in play. He'd been planning to shift the deed of our entire home into a trust with himself and Emily listed as co-beneficiaries. My name wasn't on the paperwork. I took screenshots, sent them to my private email, then deleted the send history. When I finally closed the phone, I felt calmer than I had in weeks. The next morning, I made him breakfast. Just like old times. He blinked at the plate. "You cooked thought it'd be nice to return to normal," I said, smiling. "We both need that, don't we?" He stared at me for a moment, eyes darting like he was trying to figure out if I was joking. Then he nodded slowly. "Yeah, we do." I sat across from him and folded my hands. "What are you planning to do about Emily?" He froze. "Just slightly." "What do you mean she's around a lot?" I said. "Makes people talk." Eric looked down at his eggs. "She's just a friend, Clara." "Of course. I mean it." "I know." He didn't know what to do with my calmness. That scared him more than yelling ever could. Later that afternoon, I went to our lawyer, not the one Eric knew. A different one. A woman I'd researched carefully. Her name was Valerie Wong, and she specialized in high-asset divorce cases and asset recovery. She reviewed my folder, the photos, the emails, the lease agreement, the fire report, copy the forensic notes. She didn't blink. "This isn't just infidelity," she said. "It's premeditated financial abuse. He tried to eliminate you and your share." I nodded. "Are you ready for what happens if we take this to court?" I stared at her. "I'm ready to win." The next part of my plan came together faster than I expected. I contacted the local fire department and filed a request for full access to their investigation archives. I wanted everything: technician notes, 911 call audio, all internal memos. I was polite, friendly, played the grateful survivor. 1 week later, I got a flash drive. Inside, buried among the files, was the 911 call. It was made not by Eric, but by Emily. And the timestamp 37 minutes after the smoke was first recorded by the smart home system. I checked the data again and again. They had waited. Waited while the fire grew. While I slept upstairs. While I screamed for help. They waited. And that was all I needed to see. That night, I made one more move. I printed a photo. The one of Emily in my robe standing in our living room, her fingers tracing the edge of our wedding photo. I left it on Eric's pillow. No note. No words. Just the image. When he saw it the next morning, he went pale. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "I found it," I said. "Clara, this isn't what it looks like. It looks like you let another woman try on my life. And then you tried to burn me out of it." He took a step forward. "We can fix this." I smiled. "We already are." Then I turned and walked away, knowing the next time he tried to manipulate me, I'd have more than feelings. I had facts, footage, files, and soon, the law. The weeks following the fire were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and cold legal realities. Insurance adjusters sifted through the wreckage, contractors circled the property like vultures, eyeing a carcass, and investigators poked at every crack and scorch mark to find proof of negligence or foul play. But I had my own kind of investigation underway, one no one expected. Eric played the part of the grieving husband flawlessly. Quiet, somber, a man holding the pieces of his broken home together. But I saw the cracks beneath his carefully rehearsed mask, the flicker of guilt when no one was watching, the quick glances at his phone, the faint scent of perfume on his collar that wasn't mine. I couldn't get the image of that woman out of my mind, the one he held in his arms when I was crawling through smoke to survive. One afternoon, while Eric was out meeting with a contractor, I sat alone in the main house, the walls scarred by soot, the air still heavy with the smell of burned wood and lost trust. I pulled out the folder I'd started after the fire, filled with photos, emails, and printouts of legal documents. I'd even started compiling a timeline of events, a chronology to track his lies alongside mine. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You're playing a dangerous game, Clara." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Someone new. But who? I decided to turn the tables. I installed discrete cameras around the property, focusing on the guest house and the driveway. Hidden from plain sight, connected to my phone via encrypted apps. It wasn't about spying. It was about surviving. Days later, I got the alert. Motion detected near the guest house. I opened the live feed. There they were. Eric and Emily locked in a tense conversation on the porch, their faces, close voices, low but heated. I couldn't hear the words, but the body language spoke volumes. She looked desperate. He looked trapped. They didn't see me watching. The footage became evidence, a silent witness to the betrayal that nearly consumed me. I showed it to Valerie, my lawyer. She nodded slowly. "This is enough to delay any asset transfers until the divorce proceedings begin," she said. I felt a flicker of hope. For the first time, I wasn't just a victim. I was a fighter. That night, I confronted Eric. I played the footage. His face paled. "You can't do this," he said, voice shaking. "I already have." He looked away. "I loved you once. That was then." The silence stretched between us, and for the first time I didn't feel alone in it. The fire department's official report arrived next. The conclusions were damning. They confirmed tampering with smoke alarms, disabled exit locks, signs of accelerants near the guest house door. The fire was no accident. It was an attempt to trap me. I pressed the report into Eric's hands. He read it, then folded it quietly. "Why?" he whispered. I didn't answer, because some questions don't deserve answers. Instead, I prepared, gathered documents, secured witnesses, built my case. Because this time, I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my life. The truth isn't always delivered in a single moment. Often, it comes in fragments, whispers, and glimpses like shadowed reflections in cracked glass. I first caught sight of it when a neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, approached me hesitantly at the mailbox. Her voice was low, cautious, as if sharing a secret that could get her into trouble. "Clara, I don't want to pry, but I've seen that woman Emily, your husband's co-worker, around town. More than you'd expect for someone just dropping by." At first I dismissed it. People love gossip, and I was already drowning in my own nightmare. But Mrs. Jenkins's words stuck a seed planted in the fertile soil of my growing suspicions. Days later, I spotted Emily at the cafe down the street, casually sipping coffee and laughing with a man who looked far too comfortable beside her. I observed from a distance, my heart tightening like a fist. I felt like an intruder in my own life, watching someone else live the story I thought was mine. The threads began to unravel quickly after that. Through hushed conversations with Eric's colleagues, the ones who didn't realize I was listening, I learned about special dinners, business trips, and office parties Emily attended alone. Whispers of a relationship that went beyond spreadsheets and deadlines into late-night texts and secret rendezvous. I saw the signs I'd missed or chosen to ignore: phone calls answered in another room, hurried excuses for unexplained absences, the subtle scent of unfamiliar perfume lingering on Eric's clothes. I decided I needed proof, not just rumors, not just gut feelings. One evening, after Eric left for work, I sat down at his laptop. The password was saved automatically, a careless oversight on his part. I opened his email and scanned through conversations with Emily. Their messages were intimate and casual, discussing weekend plans, favorite restaurants, and quiet moments away from prying eyes. One line caught my attention. "Can't wait for us to have our own space somewhere just ours." My hands trembled. I printed the entire thread, every page a testament to the betrayal hiding in plain sight. When Eric returned home that night, I confronted him with the evidence. I laid the printed emails on the kitchen table, watching as his face shifted from surprise to guilt, then anger. "Clara, it's not what you think," he said, voice strained. "It looks exactly like what I think," I replied evenly. He tried to deflect, to paint Emily as a harmless friend, but the truth was clear: he was living a double life, and I was the last to know. Determined not to let him control the narrative, I began documenting everything. Every whispered conversation, every suspicious look, every lie he told. I installed hidden cameras around the property, focusing on the guest house and driveway. The footage was damning: secret meetings, hushed phone calls, late-night arrivals, and departures. I captured Emily entering the house while Eric was away, their whispered exchanges on the porch, their shared smiles that were never meant for me. The knowledge was bitter, but it gave me power. Power to fight back, to reclaim what was mine. One afternoon, I invited Emily over under the guise of civility. I needed to look her in the eye, to confront the woman who had become my rival in a war I never wanted to fight. She arrived dressed elegantly, poised as always, but I saw the hesitation flicker beneath her calm facade. We sat in the living room, the air thick with unspoken tension. I asked her questions, polite but pointed, about the fire, about the lease Eric had quietly signed, about the life she was carving out in the shadows of my marriage. She faltered. Her perfect composure cracked like glass. That encounter steeled my resolve. I knew the fight ahead would be long and grueling, but I was ready, because I had learned that sometimes the only way to survive fire is to burn brighter. Soon, the moment to strike came. I hosted a dinner party, a facade of normalcy to mask the gathering storm. Eric's parents, close friends, and Emily were all invited. The tension in the room was palpable, every smile forced, every glance wary. When the time was right, I played the video footage I had gathered: the secret meetings, the whispered conversations, the betrayals caught on tape. The room fell silent, faces drained of color. Eric's bravado crumbled. Emily's eyes widened in fear. That night marked the end of the facade and the beginning of my new life. The idea of hosting a dinner party with Eric, Emily, and his parents under the same roof felt like walking into a storm, willingly knowing the lightning was aimed straight for me. But I had decided long before that I wouldn't cower in the shadows anymore. I would stand in the center of the chaos and face the truth head on. Preparation was everything. For days, I planned meticulously. The house, still scarred from the fire but carefully repaired, had been scrubbed and polished until it gleamed under the soft glow of the chandeliers. The faint scent of lavender filled the air, carefully chosen to calm nerves, mine and hopefully theirs. I arranged fresh flowers in crystal vases, polished the silverware, and pressed the linens with the precision of someone rehearsing a performance whose stakes couldn't be higher. Eric was uneasy from the start. He tried to persuade me against it, citing potential drama and emotional harm. But I was resolute. This wasn't about avoiding conflict, it was about reclaiming control. "This is my house, Eric," I told him quietly but firmly one evening. "If this night ends in truth, I want to be the one who tells it." He swallowed and nodded his eyes, betraying a mix of guilt and fear. I knew then that the facade was crumbling, and soon everything would come crashing down. The guests arrived one by one as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and purple. Eric's parents came first. His mother was dressed in an elegant pale blue dress, her silver hair styled in soft waves. She smiled politely, but her eyes flickered with concern and confusion. His father, usually stoic, seemed lost for words, his gaze lingering on me with a mixture of sympathy and quiet judgment. Next came a handful of close friends, people who had known us for years, people who had unknowingly sat beside Emily at various events, people who now wore masks of polite ignorance as they stepped into the house that had been home to so many secrets. Finally, Emily arrived, the last and most anticipated guest. She stepped through the front door with a practiced grace, her smile flawless, her posture perfect. But beneath that veneer, I saw something else, a flicker of hesitation, a shadow of doubt that told me she sensed the trap closing around her. I met her at the door, my smile calm and controlled. "Emily," I said smoothly, "I'm glad you could make it." Her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken battle that awaited, before she returned the smile and stepped inside. The evening began with light conversation, the kind of small talk that feels heavy with unspoken truths. We talked about the neighborhood, about changes in the weather, about old memories from happier times. I moved through the room with practiced ease, greeting each guest warmly, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries. Inside, my heart pounded like a war drum, every smile a carefully crafted weapon, every nod a silent challenge. Eric sat beside Emily, their hands brushing occasionally under the table, their eyes meeting in secret. My chest tightened with every glance they shared, a painful reminder of the life I had lost. Yet I remained poised, the calm eye in a gathering storm. After dinner, as plates were cleared and glasses refilled, I dimmed the lights and gestured toward the television in the living room. "Everyone please gather," I said, voice steady. Curious glances exchanged, hesitant footsteps crossed the hardwood floor as guests assembled in front of the screen. I pressed play. The screen flickered to life, revealing grainy footage captured by the hidden cameras I had installed weeks earlier. There they were, Eric and Emily, caught in moments meant to be secret, whispered conversations on the porch, stolen smiles in the guesthouse hallway, late-night arrivals and hurried departures. I watched their body language, the closeness, the familiarity, the casual affection, and felt the weight of betrayal settle over the room like a dense fog. Gasps escaped from the crowd. Eric's parents exchanged horrified glances. Emily's face paled, her hands clutching the armrests of her chair as if to hold herself together. I locked eyes with Eric. "Would you care to explain this?" I asked, voice cold but clear. His mouth opened closed. Words failed him. It's not what it looks like," he finally stammered. "But it is," I said firmly. "You've been living a lie, sneaking around, weaving a secret life beneath our marriage." The defenses Eric had built crumbled before us. The man who once feigned devotion was now laid bare, exposed by the undeniable truth. Emily spoke next, her voice trembling but defiant. "Clara, you don't understand. This wasn't meant to happen this way." "Oh, but it did," I said, the room hanging on my every word. "And now everyone here knows the truth." The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the distant ticking of the clock and the faint crackle of the fireplace. The guests began to disperse soon after, the heavy atmosphere making prolonged conversation impossible. Eric's parents left without a word of comfort. Friends whispered apologies as they hurried past. Emily gathered her belongings in stunned silence, offering hurried excuses that I chose not to hear. When the front door closed behind her, the house felt hollowed out, cleansed of pretense, but marked forever by the raw wounds laid bare. In the days that followed, Eric's attempts to salvage his reputation were futile. He tried to cast me as unstable, the antagonist in our fractured story. But I had armed myself well. The emails, videos, hidden texts, I presented them to friends, family, and our lawyers. There was no denying the truth. The fire that had threatened to consume me had instead ignited a fierce determination. I was no longer the woman left behind. I was the woman standing tall, the woman reclaiming her life. And the storm was far from over. The weeks following the dinner confrontation ushered in a new reality, one where I was no longer the silent, wounded wife, but a woman fighting back with everything she had. Eric, once the charming husband with a smile that could calm any storm, became a shadow of himself. His arrogance and carefully maintained control began to crumble under the weight of exposure and legal pressure. But he wasn't going down without a fight. It started quietly at first. Documents began to disappear from his desk: paperwork, bank statements, anything that might hint at the true extent of his affairs. He made late-night calls in hushed tones, arranging secret meetings and moving money through accounts I didn't know existed. It was clear he was trying to outmaneuver me. I wasn't about to let that happen. I sought out a skilled divorce attorney who specialized in high-stakes cases, a woman named Valerie Wong. From our first meeting, I knew she was the ally I needed. No pity, no false hope, just sharp, precise strategies and a refusal to let injustice go unchallenged. Together, we began constructing a legal fortress. Every piece of evidence I had collected, the emails, videos, fire reports, became bricks in that wall. We uncovered bank transfers to shell companies, mysterious property transfers, and signatures forged on documents that threatened to strip me of my rightful share. The guest house, once a place of warmth and memories, had become the epicenter of a calculated betrayal. Eric was quietly moving the title into Emily's name, hoping to seal his new life while cutting me out entirely. One afternoon, Valerie sat across from me, her face grave but determined. "If we act fast, we can file injunctions to freeze these assets," she said. "But you need to be ready for a long battle. He won't give up easily." I nodded, steeling myself. I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my future. Meanwhile, I set up surveillance around the property. Discrete cameras, motion sensors, all feeding directly to my phone. I began to catch their secret meetings, whispered conversations on the porch, late-night visits to the guest house, and exchanges of envelopes I could only assume contained money or documents. One night, I watched from the shadows as Eric and Emily emerged from the guest house, their faces tense but determined. She clutched his arm, whispering urgently. He looked over his shoulder as if expecting someone to catch them. I felt a mix of fury and sorrow, fury at their deception, sorrow for the man I once loved. The fire department's official report landed like a hammer blow. They confirmed suspicions the smoke alarms had been deliberately disabled, exit locks tampered with, and accelerants detected near the guest house door. It was a planned act designed to isolate me and facilitate Eric's betrayal. That confirmation gave me power. Power to confront him with undeniable truth. Power to rally support from friends and family who had once been unsure. Power to prepare for the courtroom battle ahead. I reached out to local organizations supporting women facing domestic abuse and financial manipulation. Sharing my story became a lifeline both for me and for others walking similar paths. I found solace in solidarity, strength in shared experience. The house that had once been my sanctuary had turned into a battleground, but it was still mine, and I was prepared to defend it piece by piece, day by day. The battle for control over my home and my life had shifted from whispered suspicions to cold, hard surveillance. No longer was I a passive observer waiting for the truth to reveal itself. I became an active player in a game where every move counted and every secret could be weaponized. The house that once offered comfort now felt like a cage. I spent hours sitting quietly in different rooms, phone in hand, watching live feeds from the cameras I had discreetly installed. Their lenses peered into corners Eric and Emily thought were safe behind the guesthouse door around the side porch near the driveway. What I saw was both heartbreaking and infuriating: secret meetings cloaked in twilight, hushed conversations with furtive glances, and the unmistakable intimacy of betrayal. One evening, as twilight deepened into dusk, the motion sensors on the guest house porch flickered to life. I opened the app and saw Eric stepping out of the shadows, his posture tense. Emily emerged moments later, eyes darting anxiously. Their voices were low, but their expressions told a story of desperation. He held her hand firmly as if to steady her. She clung to his arm as though afraid of losing him. The raw vulnerability on their faces contrasted sharply with the deceit that had poisoned our marriage. They were conspirators, lovers, and thieves all rolled into one. Watching them, I felt a cold fury surge through me. The man who once whispered promises in the dark, who held me through stormy nights, was now playing a dangerous game right under my nose. But this time, I held the evidence. The silent witness in the form of pixelated footage was mine to command. The legal front was no less grueling. Valerie, my attorney, was relentless. She understood that this wasn't just a divorce. It was a war for survival, for identity, for justice. Together, we strategized to freeze any suspicious accounts, halt the transfer of properties, and expose the extent of Eric's duplicity. We filed injunctions, countered motions, and prepared our case meticulously. Eric's legal team fought back fiercely, attempting to discredit me by painting a picture of instability and vindictiveness. It was a familiar tactic: turn the victim into the villain. But I refused to be silenced or diminished. Court dates became emotional battlegrounds where I had to relive the betrayal over and over. I presented emails brimming with affection meant for another woman, videos showing secret meetings, and the damning fire department report confirming the deliberate nature of the blaze. Each piece of evidence chipped away at Eric's carefully constructed narrative, revealing the man who had tried to erase me. The fire department's report was a cornerstone of my defense. It detailed the disabled smoke alarms, the forced locks on exit doors, and the traces of accelerants found near the guesthouse entrance. It was clear the fire was no accident. Someone had intended to trap me inside, to isolate me, to make me disappear. That someone was Eric. The official confirmation that he had played a role in the arson shattered any lingering doubts. It fueled my resolve to see justice done no matter the cost. Yet amidst the turmoil of legal battles and personal heartbreak, I found strength in unexpected places. I connected with women who had faced similar betrayals, partners who had been manipulated, financially exploited, and abandoned. Through online forums, local support groups, and late-night phone calls, we shared stories and strategies. Our voices, once quiet and fearful, grew louder and more powerful together. Legacy protectors. A small group I helped start became a beacon of hope and resilience for those walking paths like mine. Together, we were no longer victims. We were warriors. The house itself began to heal, mirroring my own journey. Rooms that had been scorched by fire were repainted with soft hues, sunlight streaming through freshly cleaned windows. The charred wood floors were sanded down and polished until they gleamed. I replanted the garden, bringing life back to the flower beds my husband had once tended. Each nail hammered, each brushstroke painted felt like reclaiming not just a building but a part of my soul. But the battles were relentless. Eric was still fighting behind the scenes with lawyers and underhanded tactics. Every day brought new challenges: frozen bank accounts, disputes over property lines, attempts to discredit my character. The stress was immense, but I refused to back down. I took solace in the small victories. A court order temporarily blocked the property transfer. A judge granted me temporary custody of documents and keys. Friends and family rallied around me, offering support and strength. There were days when the weight of it all felt unbearable, when the loneliness seeped in through the cracks in the walls, when the memories of love and betrayal tangled in my mind, threatening to drown me. But I reminded myself why I fought. For the woman I once was. For the woman I was becoming. For the home I refused to lose. The surveillance footage continued to provide crucial insight. I caught Emily leaving late at night, driving away in her rental car. I saw Eric meeting with strangers, likely his new legal counsel, trying to plot his next move. Knowing their actions were documented gave me a strange peace. I wasn't powerless anymore. I was preparing for the final reckoning. One night, as I sat alone in the kitchen, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator, my phone buzzed with a new alert motion detected near the guest house. I opened the app, my breath catching. Eric was there, speaking quietly with a man I didn't recognize. The conversation seemed intense, their expressions grave. I took screenshots, saved video clips, and sent them to Valerie. She called me immediately. "This is valuable evidence," she said. "We can use this to challenge any claims Eric tries to make about financial hardship or stability." I felt a surge of determination. The fight was far from over, but every secret uncovered was a step closer to freedom. The house, scarred but standing, became a symbol of resilience. Every repaired room, every new bloom in the garden was a testament to survival. I was rebuilding my life piece by piece, block by block. And this time I was in control. The arrival of the fire department's final report was like the striking of a gavel in a courtroom I hadn't realized I was already standing in. It landed on my kitchen table, thick, heavy, and ominous, an official document stamped and sealed with the weight of truth and consequence. I remember the cold morning light filtering through the windows, the faint scent of burnt wood still lingering in the house as I unfolded those pages with trembling hands. Each sheet was more damning than the last. The report was meticulous, its language clinical but piercing in what it revealed. Disabled smoke alarms, wires, cut batteries missing the devices that should have shrieked to alert me to danger had been rendered useless deliberately. Forced locks on the guest house door jammed shut from the inside, making escape nearly impossible. Chemical accelerants found at the base of the entryway, clear evidence that the fire had been set with intent, not accident. Reading those details, I felt the breath leave my lungs, replaced by a fierce, burning rage. This was no tragic mishap. This was a calculated act of betrayal. Eric had known. He had planned it. And worse, he had let it happen. That morning, the room seemed to close in around me. The kitchen walls, once a sanctuary filled with laughter and love, now felt like a cage that had nearly trapped me in flames. But with the report in hand, I saw not just destruction, but evidence, the weapon with which I would fight back. Later that day, Valerie and I met in her office, a quiet, sunlit room filled with books and legal papers. I laid the report out on her desk, watching her eyes scan every page. "This is exactly what we needed," she said. Her tone was resolute. "We can use this to file for criminal charges. But be prepared, it will turn this divorce into a high-profile case." I nodded. I didn't care about the spotlight. I cared about justice. The legal battle that followed was a whirlwind of hearings, motions, and confrontations. Eric's lawyers threw every trick they had to discredit me. They painted me as emotionally unstable, vindictive, and desperate. But the fire report was a silent, immovable witness. Disabled alarms, forced locks, chemical traces, the facts were irrefutable. Courtroom after courtroom, I laid out the evidence piece by piece. Each moment was a test of my strength, each cross-examination a challenge to my resolve. But I stood firm, driven by the knowledge that this fight was not just for me, but for every woman who had been silenced by betrayal and fear. Outside the courtroom, my life was a patchwork of therapy sessions, support group meetings, and moments stolen for quiet reflection. Legacy Protectors, the organization I helped build, had grown from a small gathering to a network that spanned cities. Together, we shared stories, strategies, and hope. Back at home, I began the painstaking process of restoration. Rooms once scorched by fire were repainted in warm, soft hues. The floors were sanded and polished until they gleamed. I planted new flowers in the garden, watching them bloom as a symbol of rebirth. Yet Eric's fight was far from over. He challenged the fire report's findings with his own experts who argued technicalities and questioned methods. He filed motions to delay proceedings, hoping exhaustion would wear me down. But with every obstacle, my resolve grew stronger. One late evening, as I sat reviewing documents, my phone buzzed with an alert from the surveillance system. Motion detected near the guest house. I opened the live feed. There he was, Eric meeting with a man I didn't recognize. Their conversation was in tense voices, low but urgent. I recorded the footage and sent it to Valerie immediately. Her response was swift and decisive. This could indicate attempts to hide assets or influence witnesses, she said. Keep monitoring. This will strengthen our position. Weeks passed with mounting tension and slow progress. The house, once a symbol of betrayal, slowly reclaimed its dignity. Every repaired wall, every blooming flower was a testament to survival. Some nights exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me. The memories, the battles, the loneliness, they weighed heavily. But I held fast to the knowledge that I was fighting for more than a home. I was fighting for my future. And with each day, I grew stronger. The legal battle was dragging on a slow grind that tested every ounce of my endurance. Court hearings became my new reality, days filled with questioning, cross-examination, and the relentless scrutiny of my character and my story. Eric's legal team spared no effort to discredit me, to paint me as unstable, vindictive, and unworthy of the home I fought to keep. But I was prepared. Valerie, my attorney, was my anchor. Her fierce advocacy and unwavering belief in the truth gave me strength. She meticulously dismantled Eric's defenses, exposing every lie, every deceit. We presented evidence piece by piece: emails, videos, the damning fire report, and the surveillance footage that captured Eric and Emily's secret meetings. One morning, after a particularly grueling hearing, Valerie and I sat in a quiet cafe nursing cups of bitter coffee. "They're pushing hard," she said, "trying to get under your skin." "I know," I replied, voice steady despite the exhaustion, "but I'm not giving up." Outside the courtroom, the media had started to take notice. The story of the fire, the mistress, and the legal battle captured public attention. I was thrust into an unwanted spotlight, my private pain laid bare for all to see. It was daunting, but I chose to use the platform to raise awareness about financial abuse and manipulation in relationships. Support poured in from unexpected places. Women who had faced similar betrayals reached out, sharing their stories and offering encouragement. Legacy protectors grew, becoming a source of hope and solidarity for many. At home, the healing continued. The house once marred by fire and deceit blossomed anew. I spent hours repainting walls, restoring furniture, and tending to the garden. Each act was a reclaiming of my space and my spirit. But the battles were far from over. Eric's tactics grew more aggressive. Attempts to intimidate witnesses, legal maneuvers to delay proceedings, and even anonymous threats. Valerie warned me to stay vigilant and document everything. One afternoon, I received a package. Inside was a threatening letter, unsigned, but unmistakably from someone close to Eric. The message was clear: back off, or face consequences. Instead of fear, it ignited a fierce resolve. I reported the threat to the authorities and shared it with Valerie. "We'll make sure they understand who they're dealing with," she assured me. The trial's climax approached. The courtroom was packed with supporters, journalists, and the legal teams. Eric sat beside Emily, his facade cracking under the pressure. I took the stand, recounting every detail of betrayal, every moment of fear and loss. My testimony was raw and honest. I spoke not just for myself, but for every woman silenced by abuse. The judge listened intently, the weight of the case evident in every nod. The verdict came weeks later. Justice was served. Eric was found liable for financial misconduct and arson conspiracy. The property was awarded to me. Emily's involvement was publicly acknowledged, her reputation tarnished. As I walked out of the courtroom, relief and exhaustion washed over me. I had won. But more importantly, I had reclaimed my life. The road ahead was still long, rebuilding trust, healing wounds, and moving forward. But for the first time in a long time, hope bloomed. The morning after the verdict was surreal. The sun poured through the windows of the house I had fought so hard to keep, casting long golden beams over the familiar worn floorboards. For the first time in months, the air felt lighter, unburdened by fear and suspicion. Yet beneath that lightness was a quiet ache, a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and the rawness of loss. Eric was gone. The last of his belongings had been packed into cardboard boxes stacked in the foyer, like relics of a life that was no longer mine to share. He had disappeared, retreating into the shadows of a world he tried to build without me. Emily had vanished too, her presence wiped away, like a cruel, vivid stain now fading from memory. I walked through the empty rooms alone. The silence was profound, almost sacred. Each corner echoed with memories, some sweet, some harsh reminders of betrayal. The fire, which had once threatened to consume everything, had left scars in more than just wood and plaster. It had carved wounds deep into my heart and soul. But today, I was determined to reclaim my sanctuary. This house, every brick and beam, would become the vessel of my healing. My first task was the guest house. Once a place of refuge, it had become a symbol of deceit and pain. Standing before its charred walls, I felt the weight of what had transpired within, and vowed that it would no longer represent loss. The restoration was painstaking. Every nail hammered, every plank replaced was an act of defiance against the darkness that had seeped into this space. Painstakingly, I chose colors that brought light, soft creams and gentle blues that whispered of new beginnings. I repainted the walls, installed new windows, and replaced the worn flooring with polished oak that gleamed in the sunlight. As I worked, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The moments of despair, the nights filled with tears, the relentless battles in court, each had forged my resilience. The guest house wasn't just being repaired, it was being reborn, just like me. Outside, the garden demanded attention. The fire had scorched the earth, leaving behind charred remnants of flowers and shrubs that once thrived under Eric's care. Armed with gloves, spades, and determination, I dug into the soil, turning over the burnt earth, planting new seeds of hope. I chose vibrant blooms, roses, lilies, and daisies, their colors bright against the backdrop of a recovering landscape. Each bud that unfurled was a quiet testament to survival. The garden became my sanctuary, a living symbol of renewal amidst the ruins. The process of restoration extended beyond bricks and blooms. I sought to rebuild connections severed during the tumultuous months. Friends I had distanced myself from reached out, their voices carrying concern and warmth. Family members, once wary and distant, now offered support with open hearts. I accepted their kindness, recognizing that healing was not a solitary journey. The community around me became a network of strength, each relationship a thread weaving me back into a tapestry of belonging. Legacy Protectors. The organization I had helped create blossomed into a powerful force for change. What began as a small gathering of women sharing stories and support had grown into a movement spanning cities and communities. We hosted workshops on legal rights, financial literacy, and emotional resilience. We shared stories, raw, honest accounts of survival and courage. Our voices rose in unison, breaking the silence that had long surrounded abuse and manipulation in relationships. Being part of this network grounded me. It reminded me that my pain was not isolated. It was part of a collective experience. Together, we transformed hurt into hope. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the lace curtains of the living room, James arrived unexpectedly. My son, caught in the crossfire of our fractured family, a young man shaped by years of silence and secrets. His eyes held a mixture of regret and tentative hope. He approached cautiously, as if unsure whether he belonged. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the space filled with the aroma of freshly brewed tea and the soft hum of afternoon. James spoke first, his voice steady but vulnerable. "Mom, I'm sorry. For not seeing the truth sooner. For being blind to what was happening. I want to make things right if you'll let me." Tears welled in my eyes, but I held them back. Forgiveness was a journey, not a moment. I appreciate that, James, I said gently. It won't be easy, but we can start with honesty. We talked for hours, peeling back layers of pain and misunderstanding. We discussed the past, the choices made, and the possibility of rebuilding trust. Our conversation marked a fragile beginning, the first step toward healing a family fractured by betrayal. It was not a promise of perfection, but a commitment to try. As the seasons shifted from spring to summer, the house itself transformed. Walls once scarred by smoke and flames now gleamed with fresh paint. The furniture was restored or replaced, and the rooms filled once again with light and laughter. The garden bloomed profusely, colors vibrant against the renewed earth. Bees buzzed lazily among the flowers, and birdsong filled the morning air. Each day brought renewed hope. I found peace not just in the walls around me, but within myself. The journey was far from over. There were still scars that time would soften but not erase. There were moments of doubt, pain, and reflection. But I was no longer defined by the fire or the betrayal. I was defined by my strength to rise from the ashes, and that strength would carry me forward. The weeks following the birthday gathering were among the most challenging I had ever faced, stretching my resilience, patience, and spirit to their limits. The confrontation I had so carefully orchestrated had laid bare the fractures in our family and exposed Eric's web of deceit to everyone who mattered. But exposing the truth was only the beginning of the battle, a battle that would test me emotionally, legally, and psychologically in ways I could never have anticipated. In the immediate aftermath of that night, Eric's demeanor changed dramatically. Gone was the calm, charming husband who had once played the part so well. Instead, I faced a man who was increasingly defensive and erratic. I noticed the subtle shifts at family gatherings and among mutual friends, his voice lowering when he spoke of me, his eyes avoiding direct contact, and his carefully crafted stories unraveling beneath the pressure of undeniable evidence. Eric began a campaign to undermine me, spreading rumors of my supposed instability and vengeful nature. He whispered to anyone who would listen that I was consumed by bitterness and that my accusations were fabrications born from a broken heart. His strategy was clear: if he could discredit me, he might salvage whatever remained of his reputation and perhaps regain some control. But I was no longer the woman who could be intimidated or silenced. I was prepared. Valerie, my steadfast lawyer, was unwavering in her support and guidance. She counseled me to remain composed, to respond only through legal channels, and to let the facts speak for themselves. "The truth has a power you cannot underestimate," she told me during one of our many late-night strategy sessions. "Hold your ground. We will dismantle his narrative piece by piece." That advice became my mantra. Every day, I immersed myself in preparation, gathering testimony, organizing documents, and documenting every attempt Eric made to discredit me. I maintained detailed records of all interactions, emails, phone calls, and encounters. The legal battle was relentless, but so was my resolve. Then came the most insidious attack yet. Eric's legal team filed a motion demanding a psychological evaluation, alleging that I was mentally unfit. They claimed that the trauma I had endured had rendered me unstable and incapable of managing the custody and asset disputes. This was their attempt to paint me as irrational and unreliable, hoping the court would side with their narrative and diminish my claims. The accusation was a shock, like a cold slap to the face. It stung deeply to have my pain and struggles weaponized against me, but it did not break me. Instead, I chose to fight back on my own terms. I sought out a therapist with impeccable credentials and experience in trauma and abuse recovery. She became a vital part of my support system, helping me navigate the emotional labyrinth I found myself trapped within. I committed to regular therapy sessions not only for my own healing, but to build a credible record of my mental health and stability. Every session was documented meticulously, and I prepared to present that evidence in court. I knew that my openness and willingness to seek help would contrast sharply with Eric's attempts to paint me as unstable. During depositions, I answered every question with clarity, honesty, and strength. The attorneys tried to shake me to provoke an emotional response, but I remained steadfast. I spoke calmly about the betrayal, the fire, the legal battles, and the path I was forging toward healing and justice. In the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense and charged. Eric's attorneys unleashed their most aggressive tactics, painting vivid pictures of a woman consumed by rage and delusion. They questioned my every word, challenged my credibility, and sought to exploit every perceived weakness. But Valerie and I were prepared. We presented expert testimony from my therapist demonstrating my commitment to healing and my mental fitness. We laid out the fire investigation report in detail, the disabled alarms, the tampered locks, the chemical residues proof of a planned act of arson. We played the surveillance videos showing Eric's and Emily's secret meetings conversations that revealed the depth of their betrayal. And finally, I shared my story, the story not just of betrayal, but of survival and reclaiming my life. The judge listened attentively, weighing every piece of evidence and testimony with careful consideration. For the first time in months, I felt hope stir within me. Outside the courtroom, the media frenzy grew. My private pain became public fodder, and the story was told and retold sometimes with distortion and sensationalism. Yet many saw beyond the headlines and found inspiration in my resilience. I took every opportunity to speak publicly about financial abuse, emotional manipulation, and the courage to fight back. Legacy Protectors evolved from a support group into a movement helping women reclaim their power and their lives. At home, healing continued in quieter ways. I planted a sapling oak tree in the backyard, a symbol of strength and endurance. I watched as its tender leaves unfurled in the spring sun, reminding me that life could emerge even from devastation. I dedicated time to rebuilding my relationship with James. We spent evenings sharing stories, laughter, and sometimes tears, slowly bridging the chasms left by years of silence. Despite the growing strength, the fight was far from over. Eric's legal team continued to challenge every ruling filing motions to delay and disrupt proceedings. They attempted to intimidate witnesses and influence public opinion through anonymous threats and smear campaigns. One day, a letter arrived at my door. It was unsigned and unsettling, a thinly veiled threat warning me to cease my legal actions or face severe consequences. I felt a momentary pang of fear, but then anger took its place. I reported the letter to the authorities immediately and shared it with Valerie. We implemented additional security measures around the house and ensured that I was never alone during court appearances. The trial finally reached its climax. The courtroom was packed with supporters, journalists, and legal professionals. The tension was palpable as the judge prepared to deliver a verdict that would change the course of my life. Eric sat beside Emily, their faces masks of forced calm, but their eyes betrayed their anxiety. When the judge pronounced the ruling, relief and vindication washed over me. Eric was found liable for financial misconduct and conspiracy related to the arson. Ownership of the property was granted fully to me. Protective orders barred Eric and Emily from interfering in my life or the property. Walking out of the courtroom that day, I felt the heavy weight of years lift from my shoulders. I had won not just the house, but my dignity, my voice, and my future. But I knew the journey of healing and rebuilding would continue long after the gavel's final strike. I stood on my porch, the oak tree's leaves whispering in the gentle breeze. The fire that had once threatened to consume me had forged a new strength within. I was no longer a victim of betrayal, but a survivor reborn. And my story was far from over. The courtroom doors swung shut behind me with a reverberation that seemed to shake loose years of pain, confusion, and endless waiting. The judge's verdict was final and decisive. Eric had been found liable for his betrayals financially, emotionally, and criminally. The property once threatened to be lost forever was now mine. But as I stood there outside the courthouse, sunlight warm against my face, I realized the battle that had raged so fiercely over bricks and deeds was only part of the journey. The true fight, the one for my soul, was still unfolding. Walking through the door of my home that afternoon was both a triumph and a trial. The walls bore the scars of the fire-blackened patches and peeling paint that whispered stories of destruction and survival. The floors creaked beneath my feet, a reminder of the damage not just to the house, but to my life. Yet beneath the ruin, a quiet hope stirred. This house, this home, was mine again. I could reclaim it not just as a structure, but as a sanctuary for healing and rebirth. The restoration began in earnest. Each morning, I rose with a sense of purpose that had been buried beneath years of fear and betrayal. The house became my canvas for renewal. I chose colors that spoke of peace, soft creams, gentle blues, warm earth tones. I scraped away soot-patched holes and repainted walls until the light bounced freely through the rooms. The garden was my favorite project. The earth had been scorched by flames, leaving behind charred stems and lifeless soil. I spent hours digging, tilling, planting vibrant flowers and resilient shrubs. Tulips, lilies, and wildflowers took root in the once barren soil, blooming defiantly, as if to declare that life could and would emerge from devastation. Each bloom became a symbol of my own survival. Each repaired room echoed with laughter and quiet conversations. This was no longer the house of betrayal, it was a home reborn. But healing was neither linear nor easy. There were nights when silence suffocated me, when the memories of betrayal and fire stirred fears that seemed to suffocate all light, when grief gripped my heart with icy fingers. Yet I refused to be consumed. Instead, I leaned into support. I sought therapy, digging into the tangled roots of trauma and pain, learning to forgive, not for Eric's sake, but for mine. I nurtured my relationship with James, my son, who himself had been caught in the wreckage of our fractured family. Slowly, we rebuilt trust, one conversation, one shared meal, one evening of laughter at a time. Legacy protectors born from my own journey blossomed beyond my wildest hopes. What started as a small circle of women sharing stories and support grew into a powerful network across cities and states. Together, we held workshops on emotional resilience, legal rights, and financial empowerment. Together, we created spaces where survivors could find voice and validation. My public speaking engagements became more frequent. I shared my story raw, unfiltered, hoping to inspire others to find strength in their own battles. The media's glare was uncomfortable at times, but I turned it into a spotlight on issues too often ignored: emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and the power of reclaiming one's life. Through it all, I learned that forgiveness was not about forgetting or excusing. It was about freeing myself from the chains of anger and resentment. I learned to release the bitterness that had threatened to define me. I learned to embrace peace. One day, a letter arrived, a simple envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note from a woman who had found hope through legacy protectors. Her words spoke of courage born from shared stories of strength, passed like a torch from one survivor to another. She wrote, "Your story saved me when I thought I was lost." Those words filled me with humility and renewed purpose. Life moved forward. The house grew more vibrant with each passing day. The garden flourished under the care of my hands. Laughter returned, gentle and healing, echoing through halls once filled with silence. Standing on the porch one evening, the sun dipping low and painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, I felt a profound peace settle within me. The fire had tried to consume everything I was, but instead it had forged a new strength. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor. And this was my story, a story of loss, betrayal, and ultimately redemption. As twilight deepened, I closed my eyes and breathed in the cool evening air, the scent of blooming jasmine carried on the breeze. The past lay behind me. The future stretched out wide and welcoming. And in that moment, I knew I was truly free.